Chapter 2. Although Bruno had 2 ponies to pull the sled, at times father and daughter would assist in pushing or guiding the sled if it got stuck in ruts where ice had cracked and refrozen. Bruno had every intention of making this trip to market a commercial success. Times, like the harsh season of winter up here, were very tough. Bruno's economic situation was far worse than even Wilhelmina could imagine. His cash flow barely covered the expense of running his herd of goats and cattle. He could not afford to pay for all the labour he needed to run his numerous business enterprises. Veltheim staff were paid after-market trips. Staff were growing increasingly nervous about the future. The Veltheim farmhouse and outbuildings needed serious repairs just to stay standing, never mind any question of expansion. No state handouts existed to help farming people in his situation. The Silver Federation had put paid to the right of a farming family to appeal to the Alpsteins for some assistance. Farmers used to be considered important citizens in the old Alpstein-led kingdom, but now they were viewed as obstructive and redundant families, occupying prime real estate that was merely holding up the white-hot forges of progress. In similar circumstances, most local families would have chosen to sell up long before all their funds had gone. Forced emigration to the colonies or relocation to a town to take up factory work in the pay of an industrialist would have been the only options available to them. Not endearing alternatives, but ones which many thousands of rural Alpine families had been forced to take. For sons of such families, they had a choice of factory work or joining the military might of foreign empires. Town newspapers were full of the machinations of foreign empires. Empires needed armies to protect them and navies to ply the high seas. Young men had signed up in their thousands already. A whole new world of trade was opening up as travel by sea and rail was taking over. Domination of trade routes by certain European powers was driving change. Mass emigration of Silver Federation people to the New World was already in full swing. For Bruno and his family, there was really no time to lose. The biggest obstacle to solving the current Veltheim problem was currently Bruno himself. He had so far refused to confide in his wife or daughters about the dire economic situation of his farm. It was just as well that his 2 eldest daughters had already figured out the family demise. Monica and Sophia were desperately trying to find an economic solution to the imminent collapse of the Veltheim farm. Meantime, farming business had to go on. The Veltheim father and daughter duo continued their trip to market. "Keep the dog under cover," shouted Bruno to his daughter Monica. "The snow will go on for days now. We'll stop once we've reached the Edelweiss Inn. You watch out for obstacles like fallen trees and hungry wolves, and I'll drive the horses on. Let's get to the Edelweiss Inn today. We've got to keep our strength up." "You mean you've got to keep your beer and schnapps levels up," replied his daughter Monica. Moving down off the mountain on the narrow rutted road towards the market town of Braunstadt was not an easy journey, even in mild conditions. Setting off in a blizzard was not a wise decision, but Bruno needed cash flow. The markets in all villages ran to a strict timetable, with only certain stallholders allowed on allotted days. Traders who missed a market day were frowned on by the market authorities. With darkness soon to fall, father and daughter could only manage a few more hours of travel. If they kept on going without resting the horses, they risked being caught out in the cold. Snow continued to fall heavily all around them. The valleys offered some shelter, but turning a corner could bring you face to face with the bitter winds carrying drifting snow. Overhanging trees were laden with the weight of snow. They looked so beautiful, yet overladen boughs became deadly for those foolish enough to disturb the snow. Finally, after 5 hours on the road, they could see the inn sign, Edelweiss, a pretty enamelled picture of the Alpine flower, moved with the winds on rusty dangling fixings from a gibbet-looking pole. "I will see to the dog and the horses, father. I know the groom here. I want to see if I can sell some of our cheeses to the landlady. If I give her some samples tonight, she might try some morsels. We could sell her some large blocks of cheese, which will keep for the winter if they're stored correctly." "Fair enough, But do not let that groom put his hands on you. I want you married into rich farming stock, Monica. We do not need another groom at the farm. We need more capital or investment, said Bruno in a strict voice. Do not lecture me, father. Just go in and enjoy your food and drink and chat to the locals. Sweet talk the landlady with your magnetic charm and drink her beer and schnapps, but let me deal with the business. I'll see if I can sell the landlady some cheeses, said Monica. With that, father and daughter separated, and the horses and Ausstepf, the faithful collie dog on his sled, were led by Monica towards the groom waiting just inside the stabling area at the side of the Edelweiss Inn. Lovely to see you. I'm now officially the most eligible bachelor in the valley, said the handsome groom to Monica. Too much information, Saul. We're just here on business, if you don't mind. But since you're talking gossip about yourself, what went wrong? I thought you'd married that cloth dyer's daughter. What was her name? Tamara or something? I did, but she left me for a rich merchant, foreign too. He came from Scandinavia and he took her back with him. He trades in iron ore, I believe. He's got his own foundry up there. She was charmed by him in the inn here. I caught her kissing him in the bar area. She ran away, and I heard that he arranged for her to join him just before he left the Silver Federation. So now you want me to feel sorry for you, Saul. You chase after a pretty young maiden, you steal her heart away, and then you find that your young bride can't adapt to a mundane life of toil under a hard-as-nails landlady. Saul, you can't say you didn't have a chance with me at one time. I can't waste any more time now on romantic dreams, so don't you dare waste mine. I've got merchandise to sell, and at least one of the Veltimes has to have a head for figures, so I guess it's me. So any talk of love and romance will have to wait for now. If you'd help me tie up the horses and give our dog a kennel, I would be most grateful. I've got a chain for the dog, and I brought him some bones to gnaw on, plus some cooked meats for him, but he still pines for me, so I'll have to pop to see him during the night. Don't try and kiss me, Saul. My dad'll kill me if he catches me alone with you. If you behave yourself tonight, and what you say about your runaway wife is true, then I'll write to you. Father has his plans for me. He thinks I can marry into another farming family. I hate to disappoint him, but I'm a business girl. I've got a head for figures, so I'd refuse to buckle under the yoke of a husband who forced me to turn back the clock and go back to farming how it used to be. I'd love to help you run this inn, but my family farm comes first, so it's business before pleasure with us Veltimes, I'm afraid. Inside the Edelweiss Inn, Bruno was waiting for Monica. Until he could see her, he supped a stein of nutty-flavoured strong and very bitter ale on offer. In the end, he ordered a large jug of the dark ale with its creamy full head. Inside the Edelweiss Inn, Bruno was waiting for Monica. Until he could see her, he supped a stein of nutty-flavoured strong and very bitter ale on offer. In the end, he ordered a large jug of the dark ale with its creamy full head. Dinner was to be a fondue served in a candle-heated saucepan. The use of breadsticks and slices of cooked meat on wooden skewers enabled the diners to dip into the melted cheeses mixed to the right viscosity. Usually, this dish was served with wine, but Monica and her father both preferred the ales on offer. Ale and fondue cheese with breadsticks and salted meats went down well after a day spent fighting the blizzards. Ale and fondue cheese with breadsticks and salted meats went down well after a day spent fighting the blizzards. Dessert was an apple strudel with lots of dried fruit and spices added to give it more bite. Lashings of an almond and chestnut sauce laden with brandy were poured over the strudel. Father and daughter both had some schnapps just to take the edge off the cold. Outside, the snow drifted ever more heavily, threatening to create a whiteout. A pallid darkness descended on the inn. 2 hours ago the winter sun had set, but now the springtime thaw just looked an age away. Winter in all its majesty and savagery was still holding an icy grip upon them. With supper served, Bruno fetched his old accordion. The accordion needed some reeds repairing. Since they were sounding somewhat flat, a fact which instantly came to the attention of the drunken bar inhabitants, composed mostly of travelling salespeople. However, by singing as well as playing some of the old Alpine Kingdom songs, which were simple waltz tunes for the most part, Bruno held his audience for a good half an hour, as he chose half a dozen well-known traditional tunes to play. Luckily, he was boosted by an old stalwart who joined in on the inn's old piano, which was equally as out of tune as the accordion, but charming nonetheless. Just as he had tired of his musical repertoire, he found that the tuneful mood was taken up by a man on mandolin, who was joined by two girls on violins. The long Alpine winters encouraged people to take up skills such as singing and playing musical instruments. Bruno and Monica were exhausted by now. They said their good nights to the other travellers and the regulars at the bar. It seemed sad to leave the others behind at the farm, but working life had to go on. Morning found Bruno and Monica up early to the strains of a cuckoo clock. Little bellows structures powered by the clock mechanism worked just like an accordion. The bellows in the cuckoo clock forced air into reeds to make the sound. After eating some cooked meats and hot spiced drinks, plus some muesli and bread for breakfast, it was time for father and daughter to head out. We should be ready to set up our stall for no later than 8 in the morning, Bruno said. We should be ready to set up our stall for no later than 8 in the morning, Bruno said. I want to purchase some thread, needles and felt for our hand-sewn items. We also need yarns for our weaving loom. Food-wise, we're okay. We could get some cooked meats by bartering our cheeses if they won't sell. I do like the salamis and bratwurst on offer, plus the spiced and herbal sausages are a delight at this market. I do like the salamis and bratwurst on offer, plus the spiced and herbal sausages are a delight at this market. Trouble is, there's so many folks selling cheese, you've got to be careful to not fall for the buyers who try and haggle you down to take advantage of you. I'm always grateful to my creator for the fact that your grandmother Tulipa is never around to stir things up. If we can avoid hanging around at the end of market when traders get a bit desperate and start giving away stuff, then I think we might be in with a chance. Monica hit back at her father straight away. The only thing we can do is to try and make our price a bit more competitive than our like-for-like rivals. We could offer a nice discount if the customer purchases more than, say, 3 of the big wheels of cheese. If that fails, then hide some of our stock if it will keep till next time. Don't let the punters see it. It's always trader desperation that they sniff out. Meantime, after you've taken your accordions for repair, I want to visit the refurbished Gothic church with the newly installed pipe organ, because a brilliant young organist called Klaus Inkelman is giving a performance on it. That'll have to wait till the market is finished. Plus we can't afford tickets for that young man's performance, said Bruno angrily. Oh, I've already thought of that, Monica interrupted. The new pipe organ is so loud that it can be heard outside, so there's no issue with that. I can simply join the throngs of other villagers who would stand outside in a blizzard just to hear Klaus play. He's so loved by the ladies. I can't believe he's not married or even betrothed yet. In all of the Silver Federation, there's not a man like him who has such mastery over the pipe organ. The voicings on a good installation are like an orchestra, so ethereal, so majestic. I believe some have cried when they've heard him play. He releases the soul from its daily burdens. I so want to meet him, Father. Oh, I'd give anything for a private audience with him. Such fatuous dreams of a farm girl. Here was I thinking you thought I was a good accordion player. Now you're planning to run off with a man you've never met just because he tinkles the ivories on a new contraption. Who would have dreamed that a machine would enable such monstrously tall pipes to become full of air as a flute, but so intricately controlled by such fatuous dreams of a farm girl? Here was I thinking you thought I was a good accordion player, and now you're planning to run off with a man you've never met just because he tinkles the ivories on a new contraption. Who would have dreamed that a machine would have enabled such monstrously tall pipes to become full of air as a flute, but so intricately controlled by buttons and handles and foot pedals, with keyboards layered like some tiers of fancy white and licorice finger cakes? I'm just glad that the monster is stuck in the church and not free to wander the streets, lest the very Alpine meadows would have to suffer its strains. I'm sure such a device would frighten my cows and goats, sour their milk, plus ruin my precious breeding programs. Oh, calm down, Father. It's just an organ recital. Nothing can stand in the way of progress. Look what happened overseas when people tried to smash up the looms of factories which could make stockings and rugs for a fraction of the price of a home-based weaver, said Monica. Oh, I'm not opposed to change, Monica. I just do not have the means to change our family farm in the times we live in. I'm truly fearful of the pace of change, Monica. I feel that sudden change is like a rabid dog that will run up my path with foaming teeth to savage me. I don't want to see the current changes as a force for good, Monica, said Bruno. Father and daughter parked up their sled in the allocated market trader stables. They chained up Aussteps in a kennel alongside the stables where the horses were kept. They carried their market-ready items to a trolley for carting to the stalls, arriving just in time to set up. The area around the market had been shovelled clear of earlier snow, but it all seemed quite pointless now the blizzard was taking a grip. Still, people still got out and about in these mountain market towns like Bramstadt. Market officials collected the rent from stallholders at some point in the day, giving them a chitty to prove they'd paid. Market officials collected the rent from stallholders at some point in the day, giving them a chitty to prove they'd paid. The fees included the cost of employing town market cleaning up staff after the market and maintaining the marketplace. There was a considerable amount of work involved in keeping the drains and paths spotless. A fair amount of rubbish was also created by the market stallholders, plus ancillary businesses. Market officials collected the rent from stallholders at some point in the day, giving them a chitty to prove they'd paid. The fees included the cost of employing town market cleaning up staff after the market and maintaining the marketplace. There was a considerable amount of work involved in keeping the drains and paths spotless. A fair amount of rubbish was also created by the market stallholders, plus ancillary businesses around that also relied on the regular footfall of the market clientele. Stallholders were also given a secure lock-up area each. They were expected to provide their own padlocks, however, and access to a cleaning store and cleaning up area, plus separate lavatories and washroom use and the use of stables. Grooms had to be employed by the town to manage the stallholders' ponies and horses, plus the dogs they often brought with them. Market stalls were laid out in a closely planned pattern by the market authorities in order to try and maximise profit and returns. Families supplying certain goods were expected to be regular attenders. Families stuck to agreed positions at the market. Signage was fairly permanent. Hawking was frowned upon in the market area, so there was some merit to being part of a retail conglomerate. Rents were very high, so it was only worth being a trader if you were part of an established group that could increase turnover to survive in Bramstadt. Even in blizzard conditions, there was a healthy customer footfall. Food shopping was a necessary part of every family's day. People stuck to certain essentials if funds were tight. In good years, it was possible to make a decent living, but the Veltons wanted to diversify into fabrics and trinkets for pilgrims if food sales dropped. Traders were starting to see that out-of-town food prepared and packed with new logos on it was beginning to arrive in these small towns via small retail outlets. Sales of locally sourced honey and salted meats and even cooked meats and cheese were starting to be hit by these out-of-town imports. Non-food items were subject to hugely whimsical consumer spending patterns, so it was worthwhile having a shot at doing them because no one ever knew how the public might react. On the one day that a stallholder forgot to bring a regular handcrafted item such as a houndstooth loom-knitted scarf, they'd be told that someone wanted one that very day, and someone would order 6 more if you could get them one today. Times for small-town traders were certainly tough as industrialization took its toll on traditional trades. Already, American timepieces had begun to arrive in large quantities. They sold for a fraction of the cost of traditional, locally made handcrafted clocks. Food prices had to be competitive to match shrinking pockets, as those who were left behind on the traditional farms and maintaining traditional labouring were becoming fewer in number. Urban dwellers who worked in the new factories had less cash in their pockets to spend. Once at their Velton family stall, however, Monica took prime position as a family face most villagers did business with. Bruno was seen as a local, but they didn't take him as seriously as they used to, now that modernisation had swept many of his skills away. "I'll take 2 circles of your best cheese, but I want a free shawl for my wife thrown in," said a wizened old man to Monica, adding caustically, "I could get an extra half circle of cheese from your factory competitors for your prices." "Yes, and well you might, sir, but the other cheeses do not have our unique charm, nor do they match our unrivalled quality. The price is very reasonable. We don't barter on price. If you buy 3 cheese wheels, we might give you a small discount, but that's all, I'm afraid. It's up to you. We only have a small stock which will be sold soon, so I'd hurry up and buy while you can, replied Monica in a chirpy but rather testy tone. I'll be back soon, child, with some cash for my first and final offer. Firstly, I think you ought to hear me out. For that, you need to come up close, because I will whisper it to you. Come closer, child, and listen to what I have to say. With that, Monica walked to the end of the store to meet the old man, bending over to hear him explain himself with not a little anger in her heart. The old man continued, I've got some friends who really like your cheeses, but someone has told me that your father is deeply in debt. I have a solution to your family problems that may interest you. I will be in touch soon. In fact, I'll visit your farm in the spring thaw. I do not wish to upset you, child, but your farming days on the Veltheim estate are numbered. So if I were you, I'd smile, give me the cheeses and the shawl at the price I've stated, or I'll argue with you, and your father will hear what I have to say in front of the whole market. Monica's face went as white as a sheet. She could see her father joking to an old friend of his not 3 meters away as she held the fort at the store. Part of her felt enraged by the old man's threats and bullying. She wanted to slap him for his rudeness. But what if her father really was deeply in debt, just as the old man had said, and he was hanging by a thread with his creditors? Perhaps if sales picked up and people began to order more of the handcrafted items, then they'd pay off their debts. Biting her bottom lip, though welling up with tears, Monica weighed up her options. The Veltheims worked hard, damned hard. If she thought the old man was lying, it was still just one man to deal with. If she told her father about him, it could make things worse if the man's words were true. Bruno was giving nothing away about his debts, so Monica had been oblivious so far to how badly her father was in debt. Perhaps, she thought, it was best to do as the old man bid. If she gave the family a chance to buy time, then things might not seem so bad in the spring thaw. After all, the old chap was just a shrunken old man with a limp. He looked physically weak. What harm could such a man do to her strapping Alpine family? Why, they could knock him down with a shovel and claim that he'd attacked the family, or make it look as if he'd fallen by accident on their property. Surely that would put an end to his nasty blackmailing threats. With these vengeful thoughts racing through her brain, she turned to the old man with a piercing look. I think we can do business, she smiled at the old man. With whom am I speaking? Ah, now that would be telling, young lady. I wouldn't want to upset you any more. Let's just say that I'm a fortune hunter. I hunt fortunes, in the same way that much kinder folk tell fortunes. I'm more genuine than a fortune teller, mind. I don't pander to what I think people may like to hear, or leave them dangling to find out more as soon as I have divested them of good coinage. No, rather, I have novel solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. I can turn a fallen and indebted family around. You see, a little cuckoo had told me that you have recently had a new addition to your family. Just as I like a nice slice of marzipan top nut cake with hot vanilla and cinnamon sauce on top, and a stuffed pastry with dried fruits and cream, all washed down with hot coffee, I'd also like to find a means of paying for life's luxuries. I'll present your family with a business proposition. If you accept it, then in around 20 years' time your family will be debt-free. If you decline, then I'll become your worst enemy, because I'll demand a harsh settlement. Take your pick, young Alpine maiden. I could be your knight in shining armour if you let me, even if you think that at my age it should all have rusted away, the creepy old gent continued. With anger inside her, Monica turned around to wrap up the 2 large cheese circles, weighing many kilograms in total. She was about to select a basic shawl for the old man, but then he bade her to give him the most expensive one, which had taken 2 days to make because it was so intricately designed. Shaking with anger, she wrapped up the prettiest and most expensive handmade shawl on the family market stall into brown parcel wrap and tied it up with string. Now then, my child, that wasn't so bad, was it? You see me as a viper under a rock, and yes, you'd be right. But you only saw me because the viper was disturbed from his hiding place by what your father's done. Your dad has stirred up a whole nest of vipers by not paying his debts. I'm just the first of the poisonous snakes to show you some venomous fangs. However, if you let me settle this problem, then your family might be debt-free in as little as 20 years from now. With that, the old man took his goods in haste and smiled at her. His gums showed in places where teeth were missing. She noticed an ugly scar across his right cheek. He also appeared to be missing 2 fingers on his left hand. We'll meet again when the great melt starts, fair maiden. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Good day. The rest of the market day passed in a blur of noise and bustle under heavy snowfall. Stores had canopies on them to protect from the worst of the winter storms. A chill wind blew snowflakes into people's faces. The shrill pipe sound of a steam engine whistle gave away the presence of a traction engine as it pulled a line of heavy carts along with yet more produce for sale. Close by this market there was also a farmer's livestock market. The sound of baying bulls could be heard carrying on the bitter wind off the Alps. Young bulls were sold for meat on certain market days. On a clear day, the snow-capped peaks could be clearly seen in the distance, majestic, jagged rocks looking insurmountable by man or beast. Leviathan creations in the forges and foundries of mankind were building ever greater machines to thresh corn, to work flax, to grind cereals and work a whole host of machine tools needed to manufacture the new goods of the future. Just the sight of a whirring flywheel on a steam traction engine with its safety valve compensator device flying around like some gyroscope was enough to remind people that mechanization was here to stay. By coupling a steam-driven flywheel from a traction engine, an employer could drive threshing and milling operations. It was the sight of a machine doing what 12 men used to do that so mesmerised onlookers. Timber could be sawn by steam-driven saws. Yarn could be woven on steam-driven looms. Pumping engines using the power of steam compression and expansion, followed by a cycle of low-pressure condensation and vacuum, had already revolutionised hydraulics across a raft of mining and drainage applications in engineering. Besides the new age of power and creation, Monica could actually feel the power of the new technology and the engine vibrations in her feet. Harnessing such beasts, which replaced the sheer brawn of men, was now the future. How small enterprises could survive this leap of ingenuity was the real challenge to the Veltheim family. It was one thing to create new waterways to transport goods by barges towed by ponies, but once these machines took over, the new world they would create seemed abhorrent to the Veltheims. Still smarting from her encounter with the Snake Man, Monica shuddered inside, an involuntary action which alerted her father, who was starting to pack away unsold items on the family stall. At least Bruno had cottoned onto the way of avoiding the great cheap sell-off at the end of the day. Good to see that we sold our best shawl. Remind me to check the takings, Monica. I sometimes think some of these locals either shortchange us or slip in foreign currency notes and mix in all sorts of tokens and piggy bank out-of-circulation coins to delight us. Darkness is an enemy to all cash transactions when money is tight. Oh dear. Has someone walked over your grave, Monica? You look pale and poorly, child. I'll be fine, Dad. I need to be gone in an hour or so to catch at least the last half of Klaus's public pipe organ concert mine. If you want to pop your accordion into the music shop for the reed repairs, then right now could be a good time to go. I will hold the fort for you, and then you could grab a bite to eat. The Wiener Schnitzel smells beautifully cooked on the food aisle. They do a good deal on a sit-down meal with bratwurst. Hearty cooked vegetables and jugs of ale to wash it down. I'll pack up our stock and load it up onto the cart. If you come back in the next hour or so with our horse and dog, then we can hitch up the sled and keep the doggy handy. That's fine, my little pumpernickel. I'll pop off with my accordion for repairs, then retire for some ale and a bite of hot food at the eatery stall. I'll bring you some food back, or else you can eat later if you like. Oh, don't worry about me, Father. I think it's just my emotions. I get a bit tearful, but I would appreciate if you brought me back some nice spicy salami, cheese rolls, a fresh cooked loaf, plus a bottle or two of ale. I really do like the bottled beers that they're brewing locally. See if you can find me one they call the Wurlitzer. Apparently it's so pleasant you can drink 5 bottles of it easily. Then the world seems to whirl by in the pleasure of inebriation. Oh, I'll see what I can do, my little piglet, said Bruno cheekily. Don't be upset, Monica. We will be fine, you know. Me, your mother, and now 3 girls to help at the farm. We'll manage, you know. It's going to be tough, child, but we will get through this. It's going to be tough, child, but we will get through this. Oh, I hope so, Father. The winter is so bitter this year. It's costing us a fortune in extra feed to keep the pigs, goats and cattle going. I worry about not being able to pay the wages of our workers. We're making piles of handcrafted items to sell. People are really starting to notice the quality of our work. If the markets were better organised, or if we could set up something on our own and have customers coming out just for us, then we could be in a better position. Everyone tells us how beautiful our handmade goods are. We really deserve to have a much wider exposure for our goods to start making a better return. Perhaps it's time to take our handmade goods further afield and widen our horizons, replied Monica. It's kind of you to take an interest in my financial affairs, Monica, but now is not the time to discuss it. I have some plans for all of us, including our workers, but they'll wait. They'll wait. For now, let's enjoy the moment. We did well today, and I can quickly calculate our takings. I want to see if we can improve our cheese production methods, plus try some new flavours to aim at the fondue market. Folks seem to like dining out al fresco. I reckon if we could team up with some wine producers from the lowland vineyards, we could do well in the new restaurants opening in the large towns. I even have new ideas for the pilgrim market. We really need to look into branding our products. Our cheeses are high quality, but they need to be linked to something. The monks might be of interest if we could hammer out a deal with them over using a link to their abbey and church. We could help in financing their works and buildings in return for branding support with a pilgrim's angle on it, or maybe an abbey logo. Times are challenging. We need any support we can muster up. The pilgrims like mementos of the Alps. I think the religious icons and copies of relics, which were big sellers, have been taken over by the factories now. Instead, we could make badges with felt pictures on them, or even badges they could sew on their hats and rucksacks. We could even offer a wait as we hand sew on your badge service. We could branch out into fashion lines, so that decorating clothing with our creations as adornments or embellishments was a cheaper option for customers. We could branch out into fashion lines, so that decorating clothing with our creations as adornments or embellishments was a cheaper option for customers than actually buying expensive fashion in the first place. We could even offer a wait as we hand sew on your badge service. We could branch out into fashion lines, so that decorating clothing with our creations as adornments or embellishments was a cheaper option for customers than actually buying expensive fashion in the first place. Your mother wants to sell our handmade hats, socks and knapsacks with an Alpine picture on to pilgrims and other such tourists. The possibilities are endless, Monica. Just smile, my pretty one. Just promise me you won't run off with that chancer groom from the Edelweiss Inn. He was unusually nice to me about my accordion playing. I know I'm not much of a player, and I stick to easy and slow waltzes where I can use the same type of bass button patterns on the bellows for draw notes and squeeze notes, but at my age, I'm not going to up my game to fast polkas and jigs. I certainly do not envisage myself taking up button accordion to meet out some fancy sea shanty. I certainly do not envisage myself taking up button accordion to meet out some fancy sea shanty. Father, I don't want to spoil your homespun icon dreams, but there is something you and Mum should know, said Monica. The latest looms in the lowland towns are steam-powered. They can make endless copies of the design at a very competitive rate. I'm so glad that you've noticed the complete waste of time it is for us to make religious icons. The factories in the lowlands are now churning out vast quantities of tin, china, and even painted wooden trinkets for pilgrims. The railways are taking people all over Europe now. So to sell to people, you have to be close to them. We can't reach all the hotels and bars and music halls to tout our wares. Our market stalls are all we have left, really. Mum and you have kept going because you don't know what else to do. I've seen some of the factory-made trinkets for pilgrims and tourists as purchased by passers-by today. Factory owners aren't interested in tradition, Father. They'll only plug into a tradition if it makes them a quick profit or a steady profit failing that. They won't be using traditional methods to make icons or mementos or trinkets. They want to make large batches of products that will sell for a margin. Price is of a major consideration to them. If they see you selling a trinket, the first thought in their minds is how to undercut you. They're cashing in on the Alpine image. They're making shawls, scarves, holdalls, satchels, badges, sleeveless tunics with pretty snow scenes on. Now that we know what a snowflake looks like under a lens, they're even making snowflake designs on clothing accessories. They've even made pictures of shire horses and peasants woven in on some garments. Everything is done by machine in a factory, by armies of workers who've given their souls to the machine-made age of mankind. As we've worked our socks off up here on Mount Rauber, there's been a revolution in the workforce. Towns are full of workers on industrial looms. Workshops are full of people turning out cheap trinkets. Grime-belching mills and power looms of the lowlands are slowly killing us, Father, so we must adapt quickly or die. Nonsense, Monika. You really are beginning to anger me now. I told you to keep your nose out of the decision-making on our farm. I really have no interest in what they're doing in the faceless trinket and bottle-making factories, nor in the endless millworks now churning out stockings and mass-produced fancy goods. I don't care about them in the same way that they don't care about me or you. Now keep an eye on things and I'll be back in less than 2 hours with some Leberkuchen and a drink for you so that you can at least catch the dying strains of that infernal pipe organ contraption in the new church. With that, Bruno disappeared into the swirling snowstorm. As Monika fought back yet more tears, she felt somewhat comforted, even only by the bravado in her father's faith in their family's abilities. Perhaps there was a viable option for the Veltimes to be considered in fighting back against the behemoths of industry, the very forges that could turn out girders for bridges, boiler pipes for steam engines, giant steel frame constructions, including ships and powered canal boats, and delicate pressed parts like brass-wearing cogs and differentials, seemed to her like some melting pot for the creation of life itself. The traction engine driver wore copper-rimmed, closely fitting leather goggles and leather clothing held together by precisely engineered brass studs. He had a close-fitting, soft, rounded leather cap, and for all intents and purposes he looked as if he had been created himself from the same huge crucibles brimming with molten metal, or the forges that sizzled with quenched steel and shuddered with giant heavy hammers that pressed still malleable hot metal to be fed into rollers for making the building blocks of a new industrial age. With darkness quickly descending, the number of customers was dropping fast as well. Monika managed to sell most of the large wheels of cheese. She found herself having to heavily discount some of the handmade loom work. She had Inkle loom-made straps and belts with fancy patterns on, but the public seemed nonplussed now that cheap factory copies were available. The effects of mass production could now be seen tangibly in her lack of sales. Customers appeared to be picky about fabrics, with price being a serious issue. Despite this, sales were steady and appeared to pick up as time went on. Monika did her best to raise her spirits after the malevolent encounter with the old man. All appeared to be going well, except for the inevitable impending wrath from Bruno once he realised that his takings didn't match the so-called sales.